Yo. So, there's a lot of jobs you can play in XIV, and a nice thing about the game is that you can level and play whatever job you want on the same character. It's a PvE game after all, and all the jobs are at least balanced enough that you can pretty much play any job and clear any content, so the meta doesn't matter. Thanks for watching. No, but seriously, there isn't really a meta. You can say some jobs are good in certain situations, like Warrior is good in DSR, and Summoner is good in UCOB, and Dark Knights are good in speeds, but those are all too situational to consider them as an overall meta. In my opinion, the closest we have to a general meta is what jobs the top level teams take for placement competition in the world race. These are the job stats of the top 50 teams that cleared M5S, and these are the stats of the top 50 M8S clears. So you can make an argument that this is the closest thing we have to a meta, because the best raiders in the game think that these jobs provide the biggest overall advantage for prog. In this video, I'm going to explain what makes each of these jobs desirable in the context of world racing. And just to make things clear, if your favorite job isn't considered meta in the world race, that's fine. You should play it whatever you like and are comfortable with, like I do. If you're not interested in high-end content, then close the video. How did you even find this channel? Anyways, I'm KOK, I'm an analyst for a top 10 race team, whatever that means, and I like talking about whatever I feel like, so I'm going to start with going over the meta healers. Astro and Scholar are easily the go-to for world racers, and that's simply because in week 1, mitigation is king. Mit is good because it keeps you alive, and being alive is good because you can practice mechanics. In week 1, when everyone in your team is rocking the bare minimum crafted gear, raid-wide damage is scarier than normal because everyone's HP is so low. Of course, as weeks go by and people get better gear from tomes and re-clears and your max HP goes up, raid-wides get less scary and mitigation becomes a little less important. But for the racers that are trying to prog fast, having that little bit of extra mitigation from Astro and Scholar will likely prevent wipes from damage, allowing for more efficient prog pulls and an overall faster pace. Astro has CU, a 10% mit, which pretty much single-handedly makes the job valuable for prog, and its neutral set can also get tons of extra value in tight spots by letting you constantly reapply shields if you spam Helios. And for Scholar, on top of having the borderline OP spread load, they have a team-wide movement boost in Expedience and a great recovery tool in Seraphism. On top of mitigation, Astro and Scholar both contribute greatly to a group's damage output with their 2-minute raid buffs. From Endwalker to Dawntrail, every job got an enhanced 2-minute burst window, making raid buffs gain tons of value. And since for week 1 groups you usually feed a single DPS all your gear, if your healer damage is going to be low because you get no gear, then you might as well let the rest of your team do more damage by providing raid buffs that don't get affected with you having bad gear yourself. Yes, these jobs are harder to play than their counterparts, but for the players that are willing to put in the effort to master these jobs, they bring a much welcome array of utility to any team. Next is tanks, and Paladin and Dark Knight are the popular picks here, although it is usually slightly dependent on balance patches as well, based on which tank does the most damage. Paladin, however, is easily the best tank for prog. With mitigation being so important, Paladin having 2 party-wide mids instead of other tanks that have 1 makes a notable difference. And also Paladin has cover, which is kind of gimmicky but can single-handedly save pulls by keeping a healer alive in recovery situations, which can also lead to a successful healer LP3. Clemency also shines in prog scenarios, easily saving people's lives in rough situations where the healers are dead or stuck hard rezzing. With all of these tools that are specifically useful in prog pulls, Paladin is valuable for any hardcore group. For the second tank of choice, it kind of depends on which does the most damage currently based on balance patches, but for the latest race, teams tended to go with Dark Knight. They have strong and flexible mitigation with Oblation and TBN, they have good damage, and they are relatively easy to play with a straightforward burst window for prog situations. Warrior suffers from having a lackluster party and personal mitigation, and Gunbreaker's mit is a little worse than Dark Knight's, and it's a bit harder to play properly in speed prog scenarios. But they're still both fine, just not as strong and consistent as the other 2 tanks currently. With these supports out of the way, we can look at the DPS jobs now, starting with the casters. And here we see the biggest difference between the M5 and the M8 stats. And to understand why, we need to know the difference between the first and last floor of a tier. In the first floor, deaths tend to be more recoverable and the DPS check requirement is way lower. For the final floor, there's more body checks, mistakes are less forgiving, and the DPS check is tight, especially for week 1 groups. So casters are pretty much divided into res casters and non-res casters, with res casters having lower damage, but providing a valuable res for prog situations. Because of this, groups tend to take casters with res early on to help with prog when the damage output isn't as important. And later on in the tier, they swap to non-res casters to bring that additional damage to the group. Yes, you can still clear a tier with res casters just fine, but when the DPS check is tight, more damage that you bring means your group can afford more minor mistakes, like taking a few damage downs while still meeting the check. It's basically just bring damage when you need damage, and if you don't, then bring reses. P ranges are a little different because their utility is roughly the same across the board, so their main contribution isn't based on their utility, but how much damage they bring to a team. Due to how week 1 gearing works, jobs that bring raid buffs gain value since your own gear doesn't affect the strength of your buffing skills. For week 1 groups, the most efficient way to handle gear is to feed every raid piece to a single DPS. So naturally, Dancer is the go-to P range to close out a tier since they specialize in buffing up a single person with really strong raid buffs, usually the person that your group gear feeds. Similarly, Bard is preferred for the early floors since their buffs are spread out more evenly between the team, and when no one has any gear yet, single target buffs aren't that important yet. Machinist unfortunately just doesn't have any raid buffs and they aren't strong enough to be a contender for a week 1 gear feed. Obviously if you love Machinist, you can still clear a tier week 1, just that your damage contribution will just be lower just based on how early gearing works. And finally the melees. Honestly, the best melees are usually just who does the most damage based on the whims of the latest balance patch. I guess monks have the best utility with their burst heal button, and vipers are good with downtiming and AoEing. I don't know, just have one melee in your team, have a raid buff, and then pick whatever feels good and you're chilling. Anyways, that's a brief explanation over why these jobs are considered desirable in savage prog scenarios. If you're interested in the meta for ultimate prog for the 0 ultimates we're getting in the next 2 years, there's a couple of differences because everyone's gear is BIS, so gear funneling considerations aren't relevant. In ulti, Picto gains tremendous value due to downtime painting, and the resing from res casters becomes a little less valuable due to deaths being more punishing. For ultis, Machinist and Bard also become stronger due to single target buffing becoming less OP, and White Mage gains a little bit of value due to downtime lilies, but Astro and Scholar are likely always going to be the strongest healer pair. For tanks, I guess Warrior can situationally gain value if the invuln timing favors home gang, and for melees, gauge jobs like Reaper and Viper are nice because they can build and carry resources between phases, which makes them a good flexible pick for consistent damage. But yeah, unless you're playing a hardcore prog in the world race, you shouldn't really care about the meta unless I guess you're planning to learn a new job. You're just curious on what's considered good to learn, in which case I hope you learn something I guess. Anyways, play whatever you want, unless you're a Machinist one trick that plans to PF Savage on week 1, in which case I'd say you should probably find a static or learn Dancer. Yeah, thanks for watching and I'll see you around. Okay, secret post-credits rant where I try to convince you that race teams are sleeping on White Mage and Machinist for the early floors. Machinist has an extra 10% mid over the other P ranges, and for the first floor, raid buffs aren't that important because no one has gear yet, so with the check being free, I think Machinist might actually be optimal. As for White Mage, they have a gap closer, which is great for fixing your positioning mistakes, which happens a lot in speed prog scenarios. They have the best mana economy with Thin Air for recovery healing and resing, and if you die, you're not completely reliant on super ethers to do anything. Plus, their kit doesn't require any planning to maximize its healing efficiency, and when you're only spending 1 hour in the first turn anyways, planning is fake. So yeah, you're welcome race teams for that valuable insight. There's no raid content for like a year because this game sucks, so this is an Uma Musume channel now. GG's!